You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello everyone, thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. It is me and Kirk this week.
Yeah.
Victoria
will be back next week, I believe.
It's going to be great. I believe
she is busy becoming a nurse, getting closer every day. It's pretty exciting.
It's so wild.
Starting her new career.
So proud of her. I'm very excited to hear what your topic is, Kirk, because our Patreon
awesome.
members know, but
yeah, they got a no, they don't know. They got a hint.
They got
a little,
which
a little
means
teaser
I got a
last
hint.
week. Yeah,
and I have no idea.
No idea. I wasn't enough of a hint. No.
So excited.
I said that, I think if I recall, I said that your story about the reintroduction efforts for the northern bald ibis, yeah, reminded me a little bit of the story I had planned for this week. So you'll just have to wait and see, because you're going first, I believe.
I am going first. So I do have to wait. You're right. That being said, Kirk.
Yeah.
One place that I think would be really cool to see, but I won't because of the cost of going to see it, but also the ecological impact, is Antarctica.
Fair. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Would love to go. Would love to see it. Love to experience it. Don't think I should.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, fair.
And as we've talked about on the podcast before, there were so many challenges for especially the early explorers that went to the continent. And even the scientists who are there now, there's a lot of challenges about being there in the first place.
Oh, yeah. There's challenges galore.
Mm-hmm. And we've even talked about some of the discoveries that have happened in Antarctica or at Antarctica. Just being there and being able to see all and do all the scientific studies that scientists have been able to do.
Oh, for sure.
So that being said, we're gonna imagine more so that you are more of a scientist than you already are, Kirk.
I am a science communicator, not a scientist, to be clear.
That is true. So you are a scientist now.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're an explorer, actually, with the pretty famous Terra Nova expedition.
Okay, yeah.
In 1911, and you're with geologist Thomas Griffith Taylor. And you're mapping out and helping explore what will eventually be, for us, Taylor Glacier.
Okay.
Now, you and your party go over a ridge. And what you can see over this ridge, Kirk, can only be described as a waterfall of blood.
Okay, that's not where I thought you were. That's of all the phrases that could have come out of your mouth. Waterfall of blood. I'm not gonna lie, was not high on my list.
Oh, good.
At all.
Fabulous. I love it when I catch you.
What was going on?
Great
You've got
question.
Me. Yes.
Hey, guess what? Remember where you are? On
Antarctica.
A glacier in Antarctica?
Yeah.
And I said it was flowing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
everything about this seems wrong and weird.
It should. So you have found what did become known as the Blood Falls for obvious reasons.
Okay.
So on one end of the Taylor Glacier, it is a 5-story fall that slowly pours out of the Taylor Glacier
That's
into
high.
a
Okay.
lake. Into Lake Bonny is what it is. And it is, the glacier itself is white, but this is like a rusty red. It is like a bright red. It looks like blood is bleeding out of this glacier. Okay?
Okay.
It's not blood.
I'm looking this up right now.
You should.
Yep, that is horrifying. It looks like a
Isn't
murder
it?
scene.
It does.
Really, really
Mhm.
horrible.
Isn't it?
It's like a
Mhm.
I mean, the snow
It looks
in
like
the area. The picture I'm seeing,
hallway
the snow.
scene from The Shining.
Yes, exactly. But I do notice though, and I haven't read what causes this, but there's a slight pinkish tinge to all the snow in this area. It looks like perhaps.
So what do you think is happening?
My first thought was going to be like lava or something, but that would just be melting way more of the ice. So it's not
Right.
that. Looks to be flowing on top of the ice and then coming down. Now I had an interesting phenomenon happen here at my house where we had pink snow one winter, a couple winters ago.
Ooh.
I went outside and I'm like, what is going on? The snow was like red. It was like red, pink snow falling. I think we talked about it on the podcast actually.
We did.
And I think it turned out just to be dust that had been blown up from Texas. To me, this red, and when you said rusty red, my thought is like iron oxide. Like it's rust somehow. But why and how there'd be this much rust coming out of the ground, I don't quite understand. So what is going on here?
Great question. Scientists didn't know for a very, very, very long time. When I say they didn't know for a long time, I mean like this was figured out. Let's see. It was figured out this year.
Wow. Okay.
It was a century-old mystery. Like, we truly had no idea how this ended up where it was. Okay? There was a couple theories that went into it, or like hypothesis, not theories. One was that it was red algae that was turning the water and everything just completely red.
I can see that.
Another was like a lot of iron and things. And they were finally able to get samples of the falls to Johns Hopkins, and using an electron microscope, they were actually able to find the solids of the samples and found a ton of iron-rich nanospheres that oxidize. So like super tiny round objects that are there.
Okay, so it's rust, but it's tiny, little teeny tiny spheres of iron that are rusted.
Pretty much is what is happening, and it's oxidizing in the water. And the other thing is that it's not the only thing that's weird about it. So that's what's causing the color, but the fact that it's flowing in the first place is also bizarre. Because it's cold. It's Antarctica. It's very cold.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
What is going on?
So they also found out that it's not just iron that has been hanging out in the microorganisms and stuff that are millions of years that are flowing underneath the glacier of Taylor's Glacier. These are really, really old waters that are starting to flow, and it is salt rich. So the freezing point of the salt water is much, much lower.
Okay,
much
sure.
higher, rather.
So this is like super saline water.
Yeah, this is super saline water, which means it's a lot harder to freeze. And since it's a lot harder to freeze, it flows through the temperatures.
Sure.
It's super bizarre. And scientists are still just exploring and trying to figure out what is happening here, partially because they know that it's really unusual that there's flowing water and that it's really old iron and there's lots of other microorganisms that are hanging out there. There's been a lot of analysis of blood falls, and some of the ways that they've actually used to figure out what is going on is some of the same methods that are being used on the Mars rovers, for example, on Mars to try to figure out what is going on, why is it so red, and things like that. It's so cool.
So let me get this straight. So there's water, like super, very hypersaline water that is trapped under the glacier.
Yes.
And
so
it's not
flowing
from the glacier.
From a crack.
Is the glacier melting and turning into that water? Because the glacier should be fresh water. So
right. This is underneath the glacier that's coming up through a crack in the glacier.
Weird. And is it not connected to the ocean then? This is like, like a lake under the glacier or something?
It's like a lake underneath the glacier,
what
and it goes up and flows out into Lake Booney, I think it is. Bonnie.
Well, I could picture, like, if you have a glacier on a lake, it's probably exerting a lot of pressure. And so it's going to, I could see it finding cracks to come out and stuff. But it's crazy that it just keeps on doing it, and that there's this so much iron in the water, too, is, like, weird.
Yeah, and, like, they're still not exactly sure how all of this salty iron water comes up. Like, that's still something that is, scientists are like, where is this coming from?
Well, Rachel,
what?
You want to know the most obvious explanation.
It's
that millions of years ago, this is where an alien spacecraft crashed on Earth and then got covered over. It's now down there rusting. Which is where the iron comes from. It's got some kind of exotic nuclear core that is,
super
giving
salty.
off heat all this time later. And that's what's keeping it, melted. And then that's why it's warm. And then, let's see, salty is, they were really into salt, these aliens. They came to Earth to take our really great salt. And they had a whole load loaded up in the cargo bay. And they just crashed and lost it all. So that's obviously the most obvious solution to this problem, right?
See, I thought the most obvious solution to the problem was that it actually is just this small cut that keeps getting, like, irritated on the Earth's surface, and that's just the Earth's blood coming up through the surface. And since the Earth is so large, it's just kind of dealing with
what's crazy is we're joking, but I would guarantee if you search the internet, you'll probably find people who believe both of those things.
I agree.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's truly, like, it is a weird phenomenon that's happening. Scientists have only been really able to start looking into this the last 30 years or so. So they haven't been able to do a ton of research into it, but they're starting because this is bizarre as all get out, and science wants to know.
Yeah, this is so cool.
Yeah, because especially since, like, when this is happening, when it really is flowing is the winter time. It's not happening necessarily in the summer. It's happening in the winter time as well.
Oh, so it's not all the time. Okay, so it's sporadic. Gotcha.
It is more sporadic, but they're just like, why? And wintertime is famously hard to be in Antarctica for.
Yeah, it is.
So there's lots of research that's still being done. I just wanted to talk about blood falls and give you a little taste of just some of the craziness that is happening in Antarctica, and the fact that this is even a thing.
Bonkers.
My sources this week were the Antarctic Sun had a great article about it, as well as the Smithsonian Magazine had a great article by Natasha Geiling. We're going to go with it. And then, let's see, the paper itself was Johns Hopkins University, Seeing Red, researchers uncover a century-old mystery of blood falls. And then, of course, the article itself was published in Glaciology. and it was an glacial hydraulic system of brine within a cold glacier, Blood Falls, McMurdo Dry Valleys, Antarctica. And that was published in 2017, but is now just getting more traction in the public. So
I realized I missed my chance. You said, what do you think's causing the red? And I should have had a callback to last week and said, well, it's yellow dye number 5.
Oh, my gosh.
It's just a bunch of Doritos.
That would have been
I missed
even
that
better.
opportunity. There it goes. Oh, well.
Okay. And then my last source was National Geographic. So I'm really excited because you've had me on the tips of my toesies for a little too long, and I need to know what your topic is, Kirk.
All right. Well, right after the break, we'll get to it. Okay, Rachel. So there's a topic that keeps coming up in my news feed. And it's been happening over the course of the entire time I'm doing this podcast. In fact, it's been coming up in my news feed before news feeds existed. Something that's been talked about and I've been aware of probably since I was a child. Okay. And it is something that science writers love to speculate and write about because it's just fun to talk about. But it's time we're going to join in on some of this fun as well. This topic is coming here to the show. I want to talk about the de-extinction of woolly mammoths.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah.
This isn't like an update per se on the current state of woolly mammoth reintroduction.
Right.
There's several companies working on it. They get closer every single day. I do think we probably... Well, that's what I want to talk about a bit. I think we probably are going to see this happen within perhaps even just a few years here. But more so, I want to look at those bigger questions like you just brought up. Should we? Mm-hmm. So let me give some background here. What are we talking about? For those not familiar with the current state of what's going on, a quick overview. The woolly mammoth is a species of mammoth, which are giant elephant-like creatures that used to range all over sort of North America and parts of Europe and Asia. And they went extinct at the end of the Pleistocene, or if you prefer, you can think of it as being at the end of the Ice Age. Mm-hmm. So generally, kind of a general date for end of the Ice Age is about 10,000 years ago. Right. So there definitely were humans around at the time. So humans definitely interacted with woolly mammoths. We have cave paintings of people hunting woolly mammoths, carved figurines of woolly mammoths and things that have been found. So humans definitely were interacting with this animal. We think the very last of the mammoths went extinct as little as just 4,000 years ago.
Right. I think Victoria kind of talked about that once, right?
I'm not sure if she did. Yeah. But it was this is the pyramids had already been built at this time. Right. Right. I mean, this is pretty wild. Now, mammoths' preferred habitat, what we now call mammoth steppe. So I mentioned last week, I was like, I've talked about something with steppes too. Mm-hmm. Mammoth steppe is the particular habitat that mammoths were known for. And there still is mammoth steppe out there in the world, but it is a rapidly disappearing habitat type that is threatened by climate change. People have proposed de-extincting mammoths and bringing them back to Earth, much like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. Mm-hmm. Unlike in the movie, though, these animals, the dinosaurs are gone for millions of years, right? Right. Millions and millions of years. Like I said, mammoths just went extinct 4,000 years ago, so it becomes not quite as far-fetched. The Earth isn't super different than it was in their time. We can still get access to their DNA and things like that. So well-preserved mammoths have been found frozen in permafrost, and with new technology like CRISPR, where we can do gene editing, they've been able to, and also some of the techniques to amplify DNA that's found in cells. Mm-hmm. They think they could create a viable embryo and implant it in an African elephant to gestate, and voila, we have a mammoth. So that's kind of where things stand. There's companies that are working on this right now. So one of the big questions is why do it? Why would you want to do this? And right. I think first off, a perfectly interesting reason maybe just be because we can. It'd be very interesting, but I think having the actual living animal, even if we're only ever to create just one single animal, that would allow us to gather amazing new insights into an animal that was seen by humans but never really studied scientifically by humans while it was alive. We can find sort of mummified, frozen ones in the permafrost in places like Siberia, but we've never had a live one. We never stood in front of a live one. So
Right.
it'd be an amazing scientific opportunity to be able to study this animal that suddenly exists again, right? That alone would just be fascinating and maybe reason enough to do it. I think it may be a bit distasteful to some people, though, just to have this like animal that we just bred so we can go, yep, there it is. Let's study it. But another reason many people might want to do this is so that people in general can see it. I mean, if your local zoo had a previously extinct mammoth,
I would be there so fast.
Yeah, as would most people, because it would be amazing. This would be a huge draw and could also then get people interested in science, get people interested in preservation of other species and stuff too, right? So it could be a good like education thing. Like there's a lot of good that can come up from that. It would just be like amazing. And some would argue that alone is just a good enough reason to do it. There is, though, perhaps a better, more altruistic reason to bring them back. It turns out some people argue that the mammoth steppe habitat needs them. This is a habitat that evolved in the presence of large packs of roaming megafauna that probably partially went extinct because they were tasty and we ate them all.
Right.
So if you don't have these huge roving large, packs of megafauna on the landscape, that fundamentally changes how plants grow and how the whole ecosystem functions. And without the mammoths there, this mammoth steppe habitat is even more quickly being impacted by global warming. And there are some scientists that believe if mammoths were in the habitat, it would actually protect it some from global warming, actually, which I think is pretty fascinating.
That is pretty cool.
So some of the teams that are working on this hope to not just make like one animal to gawk at, but rather create giant herds of mammoths to set them free in the wild to help restore these damaged habitats. And I think that's a pretty admirable goal.
Yeah.
There's one group that wants to do that in what they call the Pleistocene Reserve, basically in like Siberia. And then there's a group that wants to work on this for North America as well. So another kind of good reason to do this is that the technology and the techniques used to do this could help de-extinct other animals, maybe ones that went extinct much more recently.
Like
another team actually is currently working on bringing
wolf kind of thing. Yeah.
There are people who want to work on the Tasmanian tiger, the thylacine. There's
That's
people
what
who
it
are
was.
Yeah, there's people who are working on bringing back the dodo, which would be amazing.
That'd be so cool.
So this same technology of knowing how to manipulate these genes with using CRISPR and whatnot and gestate animals could also help animals that are not yet extinct, animals that are on the verge of extinction. And it's pretty exciting to think that we can start to undo some of the mistakes of the past. So to me, that's a pretty great reason to do it. Now, people argue like, hey, we shouldn't be spending money on mammoths. Let's work on, helping species not go extinct that haven't gone extinct yet. But one of the interesting things is that the public gets really excited about the idea of mammoths in a way they might not get excited about some other little rodent or something.
Or a little butterfly.
And so, and so the idea is that like if we can get money from the public and capture their attention with this project and learn how to do it, maybe we can help save some things that are not what we call charismatic megafauna, like giant pandas and woolly mammoths, these big whales, things like that. Those capture the public's attention, but some really important species that are small that could benefit from the same research, those are never going to get funded. So that's kind of the argument there. So the other big question is, well, why not? Why should we not do this? And there's a few arguments. First off, and I think it's a pretty interesting one, some will argue that whatever you end up creating will not be a woolly mammoth. The DNA we've collected is fragmented. It's damaged. We do think that by finding some good samples and going through that, we now actually have the entire mammoth genome, though. So they feel pretty confident about that they have the complete genomes. And you go, okay, well, that actually becomes more compelling than if you actually have the whole genome sequence. It's not like, we're just going to kind of guess the missing parts. They claim they've got it. They got the whole thing. So you go, huh, okay.
Right.
We also know that there are 1.4 million DNA nucleotide differences between African elephants and mammoths. So the idea isn't to like create a perfect mammoth from scratch, but actually take an embryo or like, basically the genes from an African elephant and just edit in the parts that are different, because they're like 98% the same. So if we can just edit in those 2% where it's important, we could create a mammoth. Although I do want to point out one of the techniques is to maybe not go for the whole thing at first. So to first create like essentially an African element that has the genes for being able to survive the cold. And then you see how well it survives. And then each generation you kind of like, well, now we're going to try these genes and these genes. And so you're not going for everything at once. You want to kind of go for success for an animal to be really healthy. And then you sort of like slowly inching closer to eventually we're like, now this one has fully mammoth genes that we've replaced at least the important sections. So that's interesting. Although they're probably never going to replace every little bit of DNA. It's just splicing in the parts that they think are different.
Right.
So at that point, is it a mammoth? Like, it's got all the right genes. Some of them are actually from an elephant, but they're the exact same genes. So it probably doesn't, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart.
Right.
So you kind of go, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it kind of is a mammoth at that point, right? So that's kind of a messy area where it's kind of like it might be a mammoth or it may just be an elephant that looks and hopefully behaves a lot like a mammoth.
Right.
And some people say, hey, it wouldn't actually matter. Even if it's a little bit off, as long as you can return to the habitat and it's playing the role of the mammoth. You basically have like an elephant that can survive in the north.
Right. Then
if it's helping that
would
habitat,
be
then
great.
it doesn't matter if it's a tiny bit off, right? So, that's sort of an interesting argument. So did you catch, Rachel, that I said they use an African elephant as a surrogate to give birth to the mammoth?
Right. Rather than an Asian elephant.
Sure. Well, the African elephants are the big ones. So they'd probably be more able to do that.
Yeah.
But here's the other argument against why not doing it. I think it's a pretty big reason to argue against doing this. African elephants are not doing well in this world.
Right.
They're a very highly threatened species. They are under constant population threats. Every elephant that's used to gestate a mammoth is one that is not busy making more elephants. And there's a serious shortage of elephants in the world right now. So I think a really good argument is that we need to be spending our time making sure elephants don't go extinct, not worrying about a species that has already gone extinct. And I got to admit, that's a pretty strong point.
That is a
it
good
would
one.
take thousands of mammoths to help the mammoth steppe habitat. And that's asking a lot of the elephant population to help support those births when they're having trouble supporting their own births. Now, I do think, though, that once we have a few mammoths, assuming that they're healthy and whatnot, you could actually gestate a mammoth in a mammoth, not in an elephant. So you'd only need elephants for just to get you started for the first few. But, it's not an argument that I think we can ignore. That is a serious issue. Another argument is just that it's unethical.
Right.
Like elephants, I would assume mammoths are highly intelligent pack animals. We know they had huge herds that they hung out in. And bringing just a single one into the world as a spectacle, or when it will never have a pack to be with, seems pretty cruel. I'm guessing they'd probably just pop it in with some elephants at a zoo or research facility. So it would probably be with something that it felt pretty comfortable with, we would hope. But if you're just going to do it for a couple for spectacle, you're going to make these animals just to put them in a zoo or something, that seems kind of gross. And I guess some ethics issues with that.
Yeah.
But I will say that's not the plan, right? The plan is to make entire herds of these animals to release into the wild. So long range, I don't think that's really an argument against it. But in the short range, I could see how these are really intelligent animals and what's going to happen when there's only one of them, right? Now, the last argument that people will make against this is that it is a giant waste of resources. This is going to be tons of money, millions of dollars spent on this. And they're like, hey, we could be spending that money elsewhere. Instead of spending millions of dollars on bringing back the mammoth, we should focus on something else, like saving a living species, or even something non-animal related, like helping the homeless or fixing public transit, right?
Right.
But those arguments don't make any sense because these are not public dollars. These are private firms pursuing what interests them. So saying you want the money spent on something else, I mean, that's legitimate, but it's not your money.
Right. It's
So the
their
example
money.
I thought of,
That's where they want to go with it.
yeah,
Then
if Ford Motor Company, right now they make cars. And if you think cars are a waste of money, you can complain that Ford should be spending that money on saving endangered species instead. But that's not what they do.
that's
not,
what
they
they're
make
going
cars.
to do.
Right. And even if Ford went out of business, all the money people used to give them for cars is now not going to automatically go toward endangered species. So like if these people stop this effort to, make a mammoth, it's not like, oh, great, now there's money available to save XYZ. It doesn't work that way. That money might go toward
to wherever they want it to go to in the first place.
Yeah. Investors have invested in this. They may decide to invest in a computer company or a shoe company. Like no one has it's not like that money has been earmarked for conservation and, oh shoot, the mammoth people got it. That's not how these things are funded. So there are better things to spend money on argument really doesn't work when it isn't your money. If it is tax dollars, then the equation probably changes. But these are private companies. They aren't spending your money. So it's kind of irrelevant. It's not going to go to a different conservation effort if they're not trying to make these. Another argument against bringing them back is that there will be no diversity, like no genetic diversity. And genetic diversity is incredibly important for survival. There is speculation that the last of the mammoths...
from literally zero.
Yeah, well, the last of the mammoths died about 4,000 years ago. It was on Wrangel Island. And they probably, they got stuck on an island when the ice started to melt around them. And so scientists think a big reason why they probably died was from the effects of inbreeding over a long time. And so bringing back like a single mammoth is a lot different than bringing back a whole genetically diverse herd of mammoths. Now, I think they want to try to find ways to like build in some diversity. I don't know. It's going to be
It's a wild thing to
first you got to make one, which would be interesting. But then you're like, okay, now how are you going to make this a viable population? Because you would need a lot of, are you creating that genetic diversity like right there in the lab, like picking genes and stuff? And which ones do you pick to turn on and off? And how do you choose? Like, do you just throw in some random mutations and then you have like some non-viable offspring? You don't want that, right? Because
that's a waste of money and everything too.
Exactly. And money and time. And so it's like, and also a risk to the animal that's giving birth. Like there's a lot of really thorny questions with this that need to be figured out. So those are some of the sort of the big questions and sort of the status of where this is. I'm curious, Rachel, like where do you stand on it? What do you think hearing all this?
Oh. Well, it's kind of like it's literally the Jurassic Park problem.
Yeah.
Is what this is. It's not so much like whether we should. It's thinking should we do this? And
right, it's the whole quote from Jeff Goldblum's character about you're so busy asking if you could, you never stop asking if you should. Yeah.
Right.
But I don't think that's. Well, I'll say I don't think that's necessarily. I just don't like the comparison to Jurassic Park in the sense that was an amusement park, and it was purely like we're doing this for
fun
spectacle.
and money.
They invited scientists in, and they were excited to gather data on it and stuff. But it was being done. The primary motivator was to open a theme park, and the spectacle. And this really seems to people who are more dedicated and into like they want to try to bring back this species to try to help nature and help a habitat, and it seems a little more altruistic than, opening they're not trying to open, like, what do you call it? Like Pleistocene Park. I mean, they actually do have a Pleistocene reserve they want to put them into, but it's not like,
it's not the same. Yeah.
They're not going to put in roller coasters and make it a tourist attraction. I don't think so.
Right. I think I personally, I love the idea, and I think it's a really fun and innovative thing to do. And I love the ingenuity that's going into it and the effort and the work. And I agree with what you were saying earlier. These are some folks who have money, and is this what they want to spend their money on? And if that's what they want to spend their money on, then have at it.
Yeah, it seems like a noble cause. It's not like they're trying to create, worker drone humans with no brain that we can put on the assembly line or some like evil, nefarious, type thing. Like, they're trying to do something amazing that we would probably learn a lot from. And Look, if they do it, I'm gonna go see a mammoth. I'm not gonna be like, no,
I mean,
no,
I
no, I
would
don't
go
want to
see
see
a
that.
mammoth. I'm not.
That'd be
Yeah,
amazing.
I would see it too.
And I suspect this is something that is gonna happen in our lifetime. You know,
This
they're
is
working
like
on it with
a
the
fun
dodo.
waffle
They're working on it with
kinda where I'm
this.
at.
Or the Tasmanian tiger. Like,
Mhm.
I would. Oh my god, I would love to see a Tasmanian tiger.
Oh,
like,
same.
amazing. And that's one that, like, the thing with the mammoth is, like, this with global warming, that habitat is disappearing.
Right.
You know, and I kind of question.
I
Part of why
question
they
if
went
it's
extinct was also global warming at the end of the ice
I
age.
think it was definitely part of it, and I do question like the viability of bringing back a species
Yes.
from the ice age. We're in the middle of
Right.
climate change and the planet
Exactly.
increasing temperature for a species that's, adapted for the cold.
But a Tasmanian tiger? Whoa.
Like
That
things
would
that
be
have passed in more recent human memory and
1926, I want to say off the top of my head.
I think that is correct. I actually just looked at the Tasmanian tiger. Yeah. Like there are people who are alive who were alive when
Yeah.
the Tasmanian tiger was around,
Yeah. And the
Or like
habitat
the
has
dodo
not
bird.
changed that much. Now, I don't think the sheep farmers helped hunt them to extinction. I'm sure they're not super excited about bringing a predator back to Tasmania.
Yeah.
But those are things to be overcome. And I think if we could do that, like, man,
Right. And like
I
I think that side of it is I would prefer like if it went towards a more recent extinction.
yeah,
I feel like one, you're more guaranteed to absolutely have the entirety of the genome,
right, or multiple samples.
and multiple samples.
Well, the
and,
funny
like,
thing, some
be
of these
able to
mammoths
do
they're
that.
finding, they're like, oh, this is from a mammoth that was frozen 20,000 years ago, and this one we found was from 1,000,000 years ago, and you go, whoa, 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 whoa. That's a lot of evolution between those two. You can't; those are not
They're not
interchangeable.
the same.
Like,
Yeah.
but I think part of what it comes down to is these companies want to sort of de-extinct a number of species.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say, I want to resurrect the dodo, people like me would be like, sweet, where do I donate?
Right.
But other people are like,
Right.
and that's not real exciting to me. But if you go, oh, we're working on mammoth, they're like, let me open my checkbook.
Everybody's like,
it's
oh, mammoths.
It's
Ice
charismatic megafauna, right?
Exactly.
So I think they're really using the mammoth as an excuse to learn the research to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm almost in some ways more excited about some of the other species that they're working on.
I would say I'm more excited about other species that they're working on versus like the mammoth itself, because for the reasons that I said is like it was 4,000 years ago, and would I want to see one in real life? Absolutely.
Sure.
That would be really cool. But
I don't even like seeing
4,000
elephants
years ago, and it's
at the zoo, like because of their, how intelligent they are, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not a great environment for them. So you're like, oh, let's throw a mammoth in there now too. It's like,
well, there's the other thing: do we even have the plants or the things that the mammoth needs to survive?
we do. I mean, the plants are still around.
Yeah.
Because part of it is that the mammoth steppe habitat has those plants. The problem is that habitat is shrinking rapidly.
Right.
Because of climate change. Like, it used to cover a much, 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 much huger area than it does now. But yeah, can it support a population? I'm not sure.
Yeah. And then there's the whole, like you mentioned as well, the difficulty of going from literally zero and trying to make sure you don't you have enough genetic diversity for the population to survive in the first place. I think I want it to sorry. I want it to happen. I don't know if it should.
Right, yeah, it's a complicated place to find yourself. We're like, man, like Jurassic Park. Man, if it existed, do I want to go and see dinosaurs? Hell yeah.
Absolutely, I want to see
and they're
dinosaurs.
going to look nothing like what they said they'd look like in the movie, right?
Exactly.
Totally different. But that's part of what I want to go to see. At the same time, should they do it? No.
No.
Of course not. I get my fill of dinosaurs all the time. They're called birds. I see them every day. That's good enough. We should not be. Nope.
Right. And
that's not good. Don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different world than it used to be.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where I stand. I'm definitely more on the fence of it because I do think that it's an amazing research. It's a wonderful goal. It feels like you're bringing back species just to see it fail, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you. Yep.
Like, you don't
Well,
want
here's
it
the
to
thing.
fail, and they probably won't at first, but overall, like, the planet is warming up overall.
Yeah, it could be a species you're bringing back to basically be relegated to zoos for its entire
Mm-hmm.
existence forever,
Mm-hmm.
because it maybe could never go back.
Right.
So here's the thing. This is the stuff that I expect we could start hearing breakthroughs on within the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
When it happens, episode 400 or something of the show, we'll be talking about it.
Oh, we will.
And you'll be like, hey, I was listening way back in episode 189 when they talked about that. So that'd be a very interesting time to revisit if they're ever successful. And it could be that maybe
really
there's something
cool.
that's going to happen where it just never quite works. But I feel like they're getting closer and closer.
I'm hopeful. I'll be hopeful.
All right.
Tentatively.
Well, you'll also be waiting to next week because we will be back with the show. Hopefully, Victoria will be back next week. We'll see. She's in a really super busy time in her schedule right now, but we hope to have her sneak away from her new careering to
join
come
us.
podcast with us. Yeah. So we'll see y'all next week. And until then, be well. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.